Welcome to the first topic about taking notes, which is one of the most important activities that you can do to increase the amount of material you learn and improve your grades. The amount of reading and remembering that is expected of you across your academic career can seem completely overwhelming at times. Effective note-taking can reduce this stress. Taking notes is not just about writing down information. The real purpose is to engage your brain to better understand and remember by preventing zombie reading. Simply reading the material that you're assigned and listening to your teacher isn't enough to form strong memory connections in your brain. Taking notes forces your brain to stay active while you're listening. It also activates the visual, auditory, and movement parts of your brain when taking notes. The more active your brain is, the more you'll remember the material. In this topic, you'll learn how to decide what to include in your notes. Let's begin with a quick preview of the 6 steps for efficient note-taking. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are all about taking notes from a textbook. This current lesson will focus on the first step. Step 4 will explain how to take notes during a class lecture. Finally, steps 5 and 6 will show you how to use your notes as a study tool. These last 2 steps will really make your schoolwork a lot easier. When teachers assign reading for classwork or homework, they won't tell you an important secret that all efficient students know. All of the material that you're assigned to read is not equally important. Over the course of your academic career, you will be required to read a mind-numbing amount of text. Attempting to memorize all of that information that's written in a textbook would be incredibly frustrating, not to mention a total waste of your time. I would like you to meet the 19th century Italian economist who will save you loads of time. You probably haven't heard of Vilfredo Pareto. He discovered something we now call the 80-20 rule. Using a mathematical formula, he determined that for most situations, 80% of the outcome is determined by 20% of the material. Other mathematicians and scientists have studied this equation and found out that it can be applied to most situations. For example, from their entire closet, people typically wear only 20% of their clothes 80% of the time. Most people spend about 80% of their time with only 20% of their friends. In classrooms, about 20% of the students will contribute to 80% of the discussions. The numbers may not be exact, but you get the idea. Why does this matter to you? It means that most of the time, 80% of the tests will be on 20% of the material that you read. Typically, 20% of the text will be the most important information, while 80% will be either details about that information or minor facts and ideas. Your job is to locate that 20% and focus on it. Using Pareto's principle, you should spend 80% of your total study time focusing on the most important 20% of the material. Being able to focus on the essential 20% instead of 100% of the text will save you hours of study time later on. So how do you find the 20%? This first step is the challenging part of good note-taking. However, textbooks and even the majority of professors provide reliable clues to guide you. Typically, textbooks are organized and formatted in ways that point out key information. Think of them as hidden arrows pointing to the 20%. When you're taking notes from reading material, look for the following clues in your text. Anything written in special fonts. Words written in bold, italics, highlighted, or in colorful print are usually key terms, concepts, and ideas. Information in a summary. The entire purpose of a summary is to sum up the main idea. Beginning and ending paragraphs. Authors typically put the most important information into these sections. Information presented in charts, tables, or graphs. Try to briefly summarize the material presented in the graphics. Definitions and examples. If the author takes the time to define words and give examples, these are usually important terms. Questions at the end of textbook chapters. Many textbooks have review questions at the end of the section. The answers to these questions are usually key terms or important concepts. Be sure to take notes on the answers to these questions. Here's an example of a page from a history textbook. You can use the chapter titles as clues for how you can organize your notes. They also give you hints about main ideas. Headings and subheadings within a chapter are also clues to important information and helpful for organizing notes. Next, you should write down anything written in a special type of font. This book has a vocabulary word written in the introductory paragraph, so that is 2 clues that it is part of the 20% information. Finally, this book is extremely helpful because it literally tells you the main idea. This summary section is like one of those cartoon blinking signs that says, "Important information." It's a big clue that this information is part of the 20%. In future topics, we'll go over how we will write this information down. But for right now, just focus on finding the most important 20%. Here's another example of how to find the 20% information. This page is from a science textbook. The diagram at the top, as well as the captions, are most likely important. This student should make a quick sketch of these drawings in their notes. Like the history book we just looked at, the publisher of this book is giving you clues about the important information by asking questions in the section review. You should read these sections before taking notes from the chapter. As you come across the answers in the text, be sure to write that information down. Finally, this book has a really helpful summary section. These points are what the author considers to be the 20% information, so take this as a gift and write them down. However, I do want to point out that you cannot only use the summary sections and skip past the rest of the chapter because they are often missing important information such as vocabulary terms, diagrams, and more. It's also important to think about the way that the text is organized. Information in textbooks is usually presented in a logical order. Often, the order in which the information is presented is a clue that it is important. Look for the following patterns of information in text. Steps or stages in a process, causes and effects. General ideas to specific examples. Timelines and chronological information. Problems and solutions. Rules followed by exceptions, and most significant points to least significant points. Transitional words in a text can also provide clues for locating important information. Authors will use specific words to indicate the organization of that information. These words are frequently signals that important material is contained in those sentences. Keep an eye out for words such as first, another, finally, for example, in addition, as a result. These and other transition words are helpful ways to understand the structure of a text. In this topic, you learned that not everything you read is equally important. Instead, you should search for the most important 20% of the information. To find this in your textbooks, look for clues in the chapters such as special fonts, summaries, definitions, examples, charts, tables, etc. You also learn to pay attention to patterns in the organization of the chapter, such as cause and effect and chronological order. Remember that you can use transition words as clues to figure out the patterns. Now that you have some ideas about what to look for, the activity for this topic involves finding the 20% information from a textbook. Try it out this week. Then check out the next topic, where we will start preparing our papers to write the notes down.